Welcome to, of course I have it. Welcome to the special meeting of the Attleboro School Committee. I'll call us to order at 6:30 p.m. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. This is a joint meeting with the Municipal Council, and so we'll turn it over to President Kobus to call the council to order.
Thank you. And so I'd like to call the council to order at 6:30, and then back to you.
Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And then because this is a special meeting and we won't be voting on anything, we'll be doing things a little bit different. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Motion is in order. Any comments? Hearing none. We could just do a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We are now operating under suspended rules.
Thank you,
Back to you.
President Kobus. The primary function of this meeting, I think this is the fourth or fifth time we have done a joint meeting between the school committee and the municipal council. And the objective is to provide a shared or conduct a shared discussion about the Attleboro Public Schools. Historically, this has been from a funding perspective, but the administration thought that it might make sense to put a larger view of the schools into perspective tonight. And so to start the discussion, I'll invite Superintendent Sawyer to the stage podium. And we have, obviously, TVs here on the stage and down for the audience for Superintendent Sawyer's presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, School Committee, and welcome, Municipal Council. It's an honor to be able to address you both this evening. Last week, the state released the foundation budget proposed under the governor's budget proposal. And we have been, for the few times before that we have met to talk about funding for the schools. And that presentation has often ended with a discussion about that number, building towards it. I thought this evening we would take a different approach and actually start with that, take the drama out of it, and then talk a little bit about what I think it all means. There we go. So, as anyone who's following already knows, under the proposal for Chapter 70 funding, the Attleboro Public Schools net school spending number is $113,800,000. In December, the administration proposed projected that a level service budget, so that number for anyone maybe at home that isn't familiar with that concept, is a projection of what running the school this year would cost us next year. As we all know, the cost of anything goes up from year to year, and so with the cost factors that we're aware of, what do we project that running the district exactly the way it is now, how much will that cost? And that estimate came up to $117 million, just over. So when you put those two facts together, as we sit here today, the gap between what the state has proposed in the preliminary stage of their budget process and what we have said the cost of doing business based on how we run it this year is $3.2 million. Now, just for a little bit of context, to make sense of that number, I think it's really important to point out that there are a couple factors that explain our increase, which is 4.1%. That $117 million represents a 4.1% increase. A major driver of our costs is health insurance. That doesn't make us any different than most other school districts in the Commonwealth, and certainly is a problem facing municipalities across the state. We have been asked to budget for a 21% increase, and for perspective, a 1% increase is $140,000, so a 21% increase is $2.94 million. So a significant majority of the gap between what we have estimated things cost and what the state is proposing for the budget is simply the health insurance increase. So, you know, that's the great percentage of the problem. So that's where we stand, and there is a whole process that is about to unfold. The school district has to propose a budget to the school committee. The school committee then approves a budget based on that proposal and sends that to the council, to the mayor, and then the mayor makes the budget proposal to the council, and then you guys approve the budget, and then that's how we start off the fiscal year. In the past, I think there's been unnecessary drama in the city over the fact that, as we have been describing for many years now, Attleboro has a funding problem, not what I would call a budget problem. Now, this discrepancy between what we're set to receive from the state and what it costs to run the district will become a budgeting problem for the district. But I don't want it to be misunderstood that I, as your superintendent, fully understand that the causes of the situation that we face and the real ability to fix the driving factors of the situation we face are not in this room, right? We really don't create this problem, and we don't have the ability to resolve it in a sustainable way. You know, the city has limited capacity. I have worked with our current mayor and previous mayors, and I'm well aware that you know, Attleboro's means are modest, and there's only so much the mayor can do, and then to put this on to the municipal council, who ultimately can only approve or take or remove from that budget proposal, means that this message tonight really can't be perceived as a plea for more money to the council, because the council really doesn't have the power to do anything about it. And so I have thought long and hard about, well, then why are we here tonight, right? If it's not to make a case for more money, then what are we here to do? So I have a couple thoughts on that. As you well know, education is the city's largest expenditure. It's more than 50% of the budget. And so I think there are some basic questions that we need to answer as the stewards of the taxpayers. So, is this investment appropriate? How do the schools use that to serve our community? And are the schools fulfilling their mission? I would like to spend a little time this evening explaining this, because I think that one of the things that the schools suffer from is that I don't do a good enough job of helping to explain to the community at large the full context of what the school district does and the challenges that we're up against. In an attempt to build confidence in our schools, we've tried very hard to not spread panic and concern about the conditions of our schools. And I think we've been successful, and I think that the confidence that many place in us is well placed. But the backside of that coin is that not enough people, I think, really appreciate some of the fundamentals of what the school district is engaged in. And so I'd like to spend a little bit of time digging into that a bit. So the first thing, ahead of myself. Excuse me. So first thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about who we serve, which is our students. And one thing that I think is important to note that I don't think enough people appreciate is that while we're all Attleboro, the Attleboro that the schools serves does not mirror the community perfectly. In fact, the Attleboro Public Schools is different in some important ways. So when you break down the demographics of the schools and compare them to the demographics of the community, two very clear things jump out at you. One is that the schools are significantly more diverse than the community as a whole, and our students are poorer on the whole than the community is. So the district is serving a subset of the community as a whole that is slightly different than the community in total. And I think that helps to explain the next point I'd like to make about our schools. But before I make that, I would like to say the Attleboro schools have changed significantly in my career. So I've been here since 1996. I've just completed, I'm in my 30th year. I am struck every time I'm out in the schools, and I'm out in the schools a couple times a week, that the students that we serve have changed over time. And if that doesn't strike you as obviously true, I would encourage you to reach out to my office and set up a visit to certainly your local neighborhood school. We would love to set that up and give you a chance to tour the building with the principal and walk through our classrooms and see what school looks like in your city, because I'm here to tell you, it has changed dramatically in the last few decades. So please, I encourage you to take me up on that. Now, because of those demographic shifts, I think it's important to note that there's a designation that's created by the state. It's called high needs, and the Attleboro Public Schools have a significant number of students who are designated as being high needs. In fact, over 50% of our students, 1 in 2 of the students in our schools every day count as high needs. And this is just for point of comparison, just how normal is that? That's a little bit less than the state average, but is significantly higher than our neighboring communities. And so, there are ways in which, comparison is always a tricky thing to engage in, but you gotta, when you're trying to make sense of things, I think one way that we do that is by making comparisons. And so I think a fair comparison here is all right, we live in an area and we are, the boundaries between one neighborhood and another sometimes are an imaginary line. And so the question is, how different are we really from people who live right next door to us? And the answer in this particular case is significantly different. So the various categories that make you high needs, and some students are in multiple categories, right, are whether or not they're English learners, whether or not their first language is English, whether or not they're low income, and I've already touched on that one. That's actually our most significant population, but also whether or not they're special education. And so we have a higher number of high needs, but I think it's important to note that that's not because we have a higher number of special ed students. In fact, our number of special ed students in the district is 19%, and that is slightly below the state average. So we're not more high needs on a basis of needing to provide special education services to students, but one of the trends that we are encountering and experiencing is that the level of need of the students we serve has increased dramatically. And so, the cost of educating a student is not equal. That's partly why, and we'll talk about this when we get into how the state does the funding, that different students cost different amounts. And even within something like special education, which you get more dollars from the state for students on IEPs, but the truth is that the level of need really drives how much it costs to educate that student, and it is a real challenge for the schools that increasingly the level of need for students who are coming to the Attleboro Public Schools is far beyond what has been historically true and what we're used to. Now, we have, under the law, we have to serve the needs of all these students, and that is something that I think we do and do well. In fact, there are a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that families understand that if you're looking for the kind of services that are best for your kids in this area, the Attleboro Public Schools are the place you want to come to. And that's in part because we offer programming that other places can't because of the scale of the district, right? We're a larger district, therefore we're able to offer other programming. So that's a major challenge that we face. Another is that there are demographic shifts in society, and not demographic. There are social factors that have changed. We're seeing challenges in our elementary schools in particular that are unlike anything we've seen before. I think the pandemic made them worse, to be honest with you, but these trends started before that, and that is that increasingly we see students with behavioral challenges. And one of the things that we're engaged in as a district is how to best meet the needs of these students, and how do we meet their needs in a way that doesn't just simply think of it as a potential learning disability and therefore turn it into a special education issue, but can we meet behavioral challenges in a different means so that we can avoid solving the problem just as a special ed problem. And that's why we as a district have created a behavior team. This is a group of professionals who are district-based. We do not have enough staff in the district to be able to put them as building-based staff. Instead, we deploy them across the district as needed. When problems with a student behavior emerges in a building, we're able to ascertain what the level of need is and deploy the staff to the school, and in a matter of weeks determine what the factors are and help to create a plan that helps to address the issues and get that student back to being successful. And this is a much more effective way of grappling with these problems. But the need for this and the scale at which we are encountering this problem is far greater than anything we've ever seen before. It's a real challenge for us. So these are our students, and how do we serve them? I gotta give up on trying to use that. So first thing I think is important to note is that the Attleboro Public Schools operates from a strategic plan. We are on our third strategic plan, Pathways to 2030, and our strategic planning process serves us very well. It ensures that the decisions that we make day in and day out add up to something, rather than simply being reactive and chasing the problem of the day. We really push ourselves to stick to the plan and make sure that over time our actions and decisions result in the goals that we set for ourselves over a long time. And we believe that this is a real key to our success. Now, as a district, I think it's really important to understand how big we are. And for a matter of perspective on that, the schools are the third largest employer in the city. We have over 1,000 employees, 1,182 by one way of counting. And that's a massive undertaking to employ and follow through on all the requirements of being an employer, right? A responsible employer who meets the needs of our employees and puts them in a position to do their best work, right? We count on them. They're our greatest resource. They are a majority of the money that we're spending. And so making sure that we are a responsible employer is a great undertaking and a big part of what this operation has to engage in and day out. We also have daily operations that are not academic or educational in nature, right? Schools are buildings, and buildings need to function. And, one of the things that we talk about a lot as a district is that some of the most important things that happen here, the operational functions of the district, are at their best when they are invisible, right? When we only think of operations when something goes wrong because something is getting in the way of teachers' ability to do their jobs, right? When we are at our best, teachers show up and get to walk in and do their best work, and various factors, don't get into the way and distract from their ability to do that. And so, again, it is a significant expenditure by the city to support the schools to be able to do the work to make the environment in which our kids show up every day the kind of place in which teachers can be successful. So, a couple basic ways to think about this. One is from a facilities perspective. I cannot say enough how much the schools appreciate how supportive the city has been in its investment through capital projects to make sure that our buildings are updated and improved in the ways that we need to. We have enjoyed great cost savings from many of the projects, and we also are able to, again, keep the buildings in their proper condition and be good stewards of the investment by the city in those buildings. There have also been, many projects for, things like roofs, floors, parking lots, right? These are all very mundane things that nobody thinks about when we think about education spending. But the city has spent, millions of dollars of taxpayers' dollars to support us in our ability to have the schools that allow us to do the things that we need to do. And as you know from the capital improvement plan, there are also millions more dollars in projects that need attention and that we continue to work with the city to achieve. Increasingly, schools require technology to do what we need to do. When I started here back in '96, we didn't even have computers. These days, now all the adults have computers, all the kids have computers, and all those computers wirelessly attached to a Wi-Fi network that now has been upgraded here at the high school to run at 10 gigs. So, this is a major undertaking to run a district of 9 buildings that work in the way that things need to be successful in 2026. And, as the city's experience, right, it takes quite a bit of an investment to ensure that that's a safe environment and, one that is functioning every day and is there for us to be there. Because I'm here to tell you, as we become more and more reliant on technology to deliver a world-class education, it would be extremely disruptive if the access to the internet on a given day failed us. And so a great deal of time and effort goes into that. We've also made all kinds of investments in communication, and then the devices themselves, right? They don't last forever, and so it has been a big part of our process to build into the budget the need to annually replace all those Chromebooks for our students. Another big part of the operation on a daily basis that, again, it's easy to forget is food services, right? We serve about 4,000 school meals every day. Those are currently funded by a combination of the federal government, which has a meals program, and then the state subsidizes the rest of it so that in Massachusetts, those meals are free. Now, the way that the meals program works is that funding, the money that is collected from each student, again, we used to collect actual money from them. Now it's all free, so it's all about accounting. You have to assign for each student, you have to connect them to a meal to get the credit. But in the end, the money that's collected through the program funds the lunch program, and we do breakfast as well. So the meals program is outside of our budget, right? We hire a vendor, in this case Whitson's, to run the program so that, and they're paid through that program as well. So their fee and the cost of the program itself all has to be within what the receipts that we collect from the program, because we're not spending a single dollar out of the budget to pay for lunches. So when we talk about the lunch program, I think sometimes we get commentary from the public about, earlier this fall, we were bragging about some of the meals that we've been able to provide, and some people said, oh, no wonder you guys, have a budget problem. You're giving the kids, nice food. I think what's misunderstood there is that we're able to do that through the cost savings of the program, right? We run the program so efficiently that we don't have to give them, gruel. We're actually able to provide meals that are appealing. And, at the high school in particular, there is quite a lot of positive feedback as to, the job that we're doing on that. And it's important to note that we're running that so well that there's a surplus in that account, and that helps us to pay for upgrades and ongoing maintenance and, really run a robust program that encourages student participation because, back to who our students are, we have many students who are in homes that are food insecure, and so our ability to ensure that they get access to 2 free meals a day is a big part of how we make them ready to learn, right? Hungry students aren't the best students. And so that we can provide them that access is, again, one of those hidden parts of the operation that, when we talk about the schools, we're not really thinking about, but it's a thing that has to be managed and is part of what we do. And then the last thing I'll touch on from an operational perspective is transportation. That's a big undertaking. Again, you've got thousands of kids riding to and from school every day, and all that goes into that. But what's important to note on the transportation side of things is that some of the runaway costs that make budgeting very challenging. One of them is special education transportation in particular. The fact that we have to transport students great distances sometimes for a host of reasons. McKinney-Vento is another part of that, and not really reimbursed by the state in a way that makes it viable, creates a runaway cost. And it's the reason why the administration has asked the committee to make a request of the council to dip into the stabilization fund for special education, because we have gone over our budget on special ed transportation each of the last 3 years. And so that's an ongoing challenge that we face and part of the bigger picture of what we face, yes. All right. Another thing that we have to do operationally, we talk about our students, about just, over 10% of the student population turns over every year, right? So we need to register, almost 1,000 students start the registration process with the Attleboro Public Schools in a given year. Only about, last year, 760 of those were accepted. Only a few were rejected. One of the funnier ones is some people don't understand the difference between Attleboro and North Attleboro, so they, apply, they register to, with the Attleboro Public Schools only to find out that they really live in North. So, residency is part of why we would reject. Other people, as you can see, a big chunk of the people between the ones that are accepted and those who start the application process don't ever finish. So some people start the process, and then when they realize, oh, you really do have to prove that you live in Attleboro, they don't complete the process and don't finish. So all that work to go through that process and register all those students in a given year is, again, another huge task that has to be done. And one of the things that comes out of that is that we get a lot of concerns from residents about whether or not we're doing enough to ensure that our dollars are being spent on residents of the city, right? That, are we taking seriously our responsibility to ensure that people who don't live here are being held accountable because, we're spending tax dollars to educate those kids. Now, I want to be clear, the state has a very different perspective on this. The state says, well, if they're registered, then you're getting money for them. So as far as they're concerned, they don't care where they live. And the state has called us and been critical of the fact that we hold the line, and when parents complain, the state is often quick to take their perspective, regardless of what the facts are, because they just want to see kids in school. And I can certainly appreciate why they want that. But that attitude is coming from Boston, where they just don't understand what it's like to live on the border of another state, where it's not like two cities that are both paying taxes into Massachusetts. People on the other side of a state border are not paying into the Massachusetts system. And so this is a fight that we fight, and wanted to let anyone at home and certainly the council know that this is something that we actively investigate and pursue. It's part of what we do every year, and a great amount of effort goes into it because, back to the point that the state is not particularly sympathetic to this task. They hold us to a very high bar, and so it takes a lot to really prove that somebody doesn't live here, because I'm here to tell you, lots of people, when you ask them if they live here, they promise you that they do, and we'll go to great lengths to try to portray it that way. And so this is a fight that we do take and take very seriously, and have been unenrolling students that do not live here when we're able to demonstrate that. And this year, we're already got 27 investigations underway. All right, so those are all the things we're doing, and part of the explanation for why this is a big, complicated operation that we're running. So, to get more into the funding, the formula that sets the number that the state creates for us, right? That $113 million, $113.8 million number is created by a formula. It sets what is called net school spending, which is supposed to be a calculation of what it should cost to run this district. And the state's formula is a complicated one. It takes into effect a number of factors and says, students of different ages, they calculate at a different rate, and the various subgroups that we talked about, so they pay extra money for students who are identified as low income, they pay different amounts for students who are CTE students, they pay different amounts for English language learners, and so they put it all in and they say, okay, with all these different factors, this district, it should cost this much to educate the kids. Because there's an understanding that the level of need, right, and back to Attleboro's got higher needs than our neighbors, that level of need does impact how much it costs to educate the kids in that community. So I agree with that approach. The problem is that that formula was created back in the 90s, and it's been adjusted a couple times, so they have made an attempt to improve it. But in the end, I'm going to provide you with some compelling evidence for why I would say it's still a work that needs some attention, because it produces a number that is insufficient to actually run a district on. The other thing you should know about this number is that there's a calculation in it for, all right, it costs this much to run a district. Then they figure out, well, how much is the state going to pay and how much is the local contribution? How much are we going to expect the local community to? And when we have reached out to the state to try to understand why Attleboro is so funded at such a low rate comparatively to just about everybody else, consistently the answer we get is that we suffer from the local contribution calculation. I'm quoting here, it is a blunt measure, and for reasons that are out of my depths to be able to explain, it does not favor us, because when it comes right down to it, we're asked to put in an amount of money that is a struggle for the city to provide, and unlike other communities that simply can go into their pockets and provide extra funding, which is the norm across the state, here in Attleboro, our residents are already paying a higher than their neighbor tax rate. So why does it that in a community that's already paying a high tax rate, being expected to pay at a rate that would make it a challenge for them to come up with extra dollars? Again, I don't have a good answer for why that works out the way it does, but I am here to identify it as a driver for why we're in the situation that we're in, and one that the people who are working on this at the state level recognize, because Attleboro's not the only community, although most communities fare better in one direction or the other. Either you're wealthy enough to provide extra because the number that the system produces isn't strong enough, or the state is paying a higher percentage of it, right? And so in either way, most communities do fare better, which is why when you look at how Attleboro is funded, we come out the way we do. And then the last thing I just want to say about Chapter 70 is that this formula, which again was written a long time ago, assumed continuous growth, right? You have to keep growing to have the money continue. And as you know, if anyone who's reading the paper knows, enrollment's actually down across the state. In fact, Attleboro, on the whole, has done fairly well over the last 20 years. Our enrollment has been around 6,000 for as long as I can remember, for decades now. Whereas most communities have seen a decline. So in that way, Attleboro fares pretty well. But because of the way that growth is sort of baked into the way that the formula works, when we have a year like we do this year, in which our enrollment is down 77 students, that has an impact of well over $1 million for us. And you know, when you have 6,000 students, 77 is just over 1% of the population. In a world where 10% of the population comes and goes every year, it is not unusual for the number of kids to go up and down by that much. We fluctuate. And that is well within the band of what should normally be expected. But because of, the way the formula is set up, even that small amount, which is very reasonable, helps to create a situation in which we have the gap that I described at the beginning of the presentation. All right, so let me give you a couple numbers just to help make the point I'm explaining. So this is the graph of spending above required net school spending. It's 10 years, Attleboro's blue, the state is red. So first thing you should immediately notice is that Attleboro has largely followed the same trend as the state, right? Those two lines more or less mimic each other, and that's because it's all tied back to Chapter 70. So what's interesting, though, is you'll see that the state's numbers have fluctuated between, I guess the lowest number is 19.6%, and the highest was 27.5%, so there's almost a 10% difference there. But the average community in the Commonwealth takes that net school spending number, looks at it and says, well, you can't run a district on that amount, and then goes into pocket and produces 20% more for their local budget, right? And again, that's both average and median. In fact, you have to get down out into the bottom 20% to get to a number that isn't, that is less than 10% of above net school spending. And so Attleboro stands out in having a above net school spending number as low as we do, right? The highest we've had in this time period is 4.1%, and last year we have one under 1%. So this is, to me, the most important takeaway here is that when we talk about the needs of the district, I think it's really important to understand that we are required under the law to do a range of things, right? I talked earlier about how, when students have an IEP, we are required to provide services under that IEP. We have accountability measures that we have to meet. There are all kinds of requirements that we must face. And so to provide those services that, again, are not a choice but a requirement under regulation, creates the environment in which, again, the districts across the state are saying they can't do it at the number that net school spending produces. We're telling you that we can't do it either, and there's a huge gap in our capacity to compensate, which creates the disparity. It's not a lack of desire to do well. It really comes down to means and the fact that the formula itself, I think, is the problem. If the formula better reflected the actual cost, then the state would have to come up with those dollars, and Attleboro would fare better. Instead, it's comfortable to let local communities compensate for themselves right? And a city like Attleboro that doesn't have those means results in us having the disparity that we cannot keep up with the rest of the state. So, again, just looking locally, if we compare ourselves to our neighbors, right, the number of dollars we would have at their funding levels, right, range from 15 to almost $40 million more, right? That's, again, and these are our neighbors. This isn't comparing us to markedly different places. You know, I'm not saying, oh, we should be like Wellesley. I'm saying if we were funded like our neighbors are funded, we would have significantly greater dollars. And to me, this is the argument for why it's not just wishful thinking on the part of the school department when we point out that this disparity is real, it has an impact on children, right? We do not have the same means that other districts do to meet the challenges we all face and are required to deliver on. Now, that all said, we get a lot done with what we have. We are quite proud of what we accomplish. We know that the kids are coming every day, right, ready to learn, and their parents expect us to deliver an excellent education. And I think it's important to put that education in the proper context. Massachusetts is the leading state in the nation for education. We get the best results in the entire country. And if Massachusetts were a country, right, it produces results among the best in the world, right? So when I tell you that our students are doing comparably well at the state level, I'm telling you that they're doing as well as kids anywhere in the country or in the world, right? The children of Attleboro are getting a world-class education, despite the fact that we have to do it with a challenging set of circumstances. So what are we accomplishing? Well, one, we try to make up some of this difference by getting as much help as we can. And I'll talk about that for a second. One, I think if we look at the results, a lot of reason to be encouraged by that. We're very proud of the opportunities that we provide our students, and we never rest on our laurels. We're always trying to stay ahead of things. A huge part of what we do is foster partnerships with people in the community who have things to offer our students, right? We're an educational institution, right? We're about reading and writing, right? There are lots of things our kids need that we are not qualified to provide them, right? There's a lot of concern about mental health issues with our kids, and those concerns are real. But we are not mental health providers, right? That's not our lane. That's not what we're good at. So working with the people who that is their job, that is their area of expertise, is a win for us because we want to make those connections. We want to help families get the services they need that we can't provide. So we see it as part of our responsibility to connect our kids who we have access to, right, and their families to services that are looking to be support for them. Because in the end, when we meet the needs of our students through partnerships, we're helping to put them in a better position so that they can do their best work, right? Healthy students are easier to educate, right? It's that simple. So we have over 50 partnerships. We participate in all kinds of community activities, and we're very proud of the work we've done to foster those relationships. 15 years ago, that was not the reputation we had. That was not the reality, and we've really grown that, and we think that our students benefit from it, and it's one of the ways that we accomplish, meeting their needs. I also don't want it to be lost in the fact that we aggressively pursue grant dollars, right? Millions of dollars are brought into the district through the hard work of ensuring that we are applying for appropriate grants and bringing those grant dollars in. As I'm sure you understand, grants don't pay you to do the work you're already doing. They come with strings because people want you to do something you're not doing. But there are ways to be creative and use those funds to accomplish both what they're looking for, but also accomplish a need that you have, and where you match well with grants that suit what you're already doing. It's a way to fund things that we don't have the funds for otherwise. And so we are supplementing quite a bit of our work with grants as much as possible. So that's part of how we get this all done. All right, but how are we doing? So it's important to know that the most legitimate comparison we can make as a district is to compare ourselves to what we refer to as DART districts. DART districts is a tool that the state provides. Every year, they tell us which 10 communities are the closest match to the students that we serve, right? So it's not a comparison of communities. In fact, I've certainly had people say, oh, that community, this community, that's nothing like Attleboro. This is silly. But that's not what we're comparing. We're not comparing the communities themselves. We're comparing the demographics of the students served by that community. And so on a statistical basis, the state says, okay, this year, these are the communities that are closest to you. And then, across the Commonwealth, we say to ourselves, all right, if these are the communities that look like us, how do we fare in comparison to them? And it's important to note that when you compare them all, and here they are this year, it's Cambridge, Somerville, Waltham, Agawam, Medford, Weymouth, Stoughton, Quincy, Peabody, and West Springfield. Attleboro, you'll notice, is spending the least per pupil out of all of those. So again, those communities are most like us, not community to community, but in terms of the students that they serve. And as I will keep ringing the alarm bell, when we compare ourselves to them, our funding is the lowest of the group. However, the good news is when you chart that against results, and these are aggregate results, in the packet that I sent everyone, I actually gave a bunch of detailed slides. This one just is the summary slide, which I think is the best way to handle this particular moment. So we're all the way to the left, which is what is the point about funding. And then in terms of up and down, right, that's how we're doing achievement-wise. And so we're not the tops, but we're more than above half of them. So even though we have the least amount of funds to work with, and we are educating kids that are like these other communities, the closest match that we have, our results are, middle of the pack, a little bit better than dead middle. And we take real pride in that we're getting, again, comparable results at a real value, and able to achieve that by what we think is the good work. And I should take a moment to say that, without the hard work of the educators of this district who come here every day to serve our students and who understand this challenge and do their best to face it every day, we would not achieve these results. We are all blessed to have their commitment, and we could not accomplish this without their hard work. Not only are we proud of the results we get, but we're also proud of what we get to offer students. When we opened this new high school, we opened a new chapter in education here in Attleboro. We do something at Attleboro High School that no other community is able to do at this point, which is that we offer Chapter 7-4 programming, that's career and technical education, for every student here in the city, right? There are long waiting lists for programs at the regional vocational schools across the state. Many people are waking up to the fact that CTE is the future of education, right? And that the education that you get there is again, among the best in the world. So here in Attleboro, we don't send our students to a regional to get that access to that education. And our students don't have to suffer from the waiting list problem that the others do, because we have a seat for every last one of them. Now, not every kid necessarily gets their first choice, but no students are shut out if they're willing to take where the seats are available. So this is, a level of access which is unparalleled. Nobody else is able to do this. And it's a real strength of the Attleboro Public Schools. And one of the reasons why they built this building for 1,725 kids. We begged them to let us build a bigger building. The state said, nope, enrollments are declining. We've looked at your trends. You can't have a bigger building than that. We have 2,000 kids there, right? People can't get enough of Attleboro High School because it is offering something that nobody else is. The last thing I just wanted to talk about tonight is, we try to stay ahead of things, and, there's a lot of challenges that we face. But the last one is that, like the rest of the world, our industry is being challenged by artificial intelligence. It's a real thing that, I think a lot of people worry about AI just in terms of, plagiarism, right? You can certainly use AI to do a lot of the work I was assigned as a high school student. And so, teachers have to really adjust some practices, especially in a world where we've given the kids Chromebooks. And so, now they can take that Chromebook and use AI to do the work that historically we've been assigning to them. But more than that, as AI transforms the economy, transforms opportunity, and really, challenges many of the traditional ways we think about how work will be done and what a good employee can or can't do. We need to, as a school district, really be on the leading edge of thinking through what do the students of the future need to know and be able to do, given that the powerful tool of AI is going to be pervasive, and really, we believe, go a long way to setting who the winners and losers of the future are. And we are not going to wait to find out the hard way how that's all going to sort itself out. We absolutely need to engage in this, and we are actively working on this problem and thinking through what are the changes we need to make as an institution so that our kids are going to be the winners in that future and not find out the hard way how sticking to what traditionally worked was a bad gambit. So I know I've thrown a lot at you, but really the point I wanted to make this evening is that the Attleboro Public Schools are a large, complex organization that are tasked with accomplishing a pretty extensive list of to-dos. And the more we as a community embrace the fact that the reality is that the state, through its funding system, has created disparity that a place like Attleboro falls through the cracks through. No one's doing this to us intentionally, but we have to really raise up and with one voice express the need to address this, because failure to do so will lead us in a situation where I think that the problems that we face become increasingly unsustainable. Yes, this year's budget number from the state is going to be a problem for us. It's going to be a challenge. I appreciate that the mayor is here tonight, and I know that through our partnership, we're going to find a way to work this out and get to a place that next year will be a success like last year was or this year was, right? But as I said last time, the worry I have is how much farther can we go down this path before this all really comes due on us. And in many ways, Attleboro is the canary in the coal mine. More and more you hear communities talking about their concerns about being able to pay for the various services that people have come used to expecting. There's a growing chorus that municipalities are facing a challenge that the state needs to do something. And I think that that's encouraging because while it's just an Attleboro problem, I don't have a lot of confidence that the state's going to care to fix it for one community. As more and more communities express a concern, I think there's a bigger and bigger chance that there'll be a consensus that something needs to change. But I think it's really important that the residents of Attleboro understand the reality that we face so that we can, with one voice, engage that process and send a clear message about what Attleboro needs to come out ahead in whatever changes will be considered, hopefully, in the near future. So with that, presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. As he mentioned, that was a lot of information. The committee has an opportunity to grill the superintendent on stuff like this just about every other week. So we do want this to, although the committee, I'm sure, does have some questions and comments, I want to open it up to the council first to see if anyone has any clarifying questions, any specific questions among data points, or just anything in response to what you've heard tonight.
Go ahead.
Mr. Tavares?
No, go ahead.
No? Okay. Either way, we'll go. Okay,
Please.
sure. So just a quick question, and thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. Really appreciate the presentation. Just curious, because you mentioned residency requirements and how there are questions that come up, and I know as a counselor those are things that maybe not a direct question, but those are things that people have brought up of, oh, I see a lot of Rhode Island plates, or X, Y, Z, whatever the factor is. How are these investigations that you undertake generally initiated? What triggers that?
So this would be a good place to mention that I brought my team with me tonight, and Mr. Palmer, who runs the Welcome Center in these investigations, will be glad to really get into the details on this.
Yes, could you just paraphrase it? Hi. Could you paraphrase your question one more time for me? I'm
Sure,
sorry.
yeah. So the question is, how do these investigations normally, how are they initiated?
They're initiated typically from either a school reaching out to us saying that we have reason to believe that the student doesn't not belong here, but doesn't live here and resides elsewhere. A student will sometimes say it unintentionally, which is, or intentionally, because it's a conversation that's been going on. There are other ways that we note it as well, but Rhode Island plates are a big draw. However, what we do find with most Rhode Island plates is that they're grandparents or they're from a business. That doesn't mean that they all are. But we also don't have the right to look up license plate numbers. So typically it's through hearsay or bus drop-offs and pickups. There's a lot of different ways. We also have people who don't realize that they might not be following the residency rules, based on grandparents living here or anything along those lines, where, no, but you still have to live here. So we have a lot of clearing up that we have to do along the way. But there are quite a few of them. We did about 100 of them over the last 2 years. And we do have a significant number now that we're turning over into disenrollment, but we want to make sure we do them all thoroughly because, really, as Mr. Sawyer said, our job is to educate students. So, I need to know that the student will be educated. And we are very supportive of the families that we do bring in for those conversations.
Thank you.
Ms.
Any other
Dolan?
questions?
Thanks. Thank you for everything tonight, all the information. So we know the formula is the issue, right? A big part of the issue. And, how are we going to get them to care about one community if other communities come forward and have the same issue? And as you stated that, paraphrasing that, Attleboro's unfairly treated in this formula. So we really can't wait for other communities to come forward, right? What do we do to be louder? What do we do to go to the state? What do we do? How can we be a thorn in their side to pay attention, even if we're just one community?
So I think we're very lucky that our legislative team, I think, understands this problem and is supportive. I know that other superintendents who see things similarly don't necessarily enjoy that kind of support, and so I do feel that it's fortunate that I don't have to waste a lot of time making that case. But to your point, until there are enough other communities, it is a bit of an uphill climb. But I would call it the good news, but it's really bad news that the economics of all of this are really catching up with a lot of other places. And so I actually think Chairman Geddes can help a little bit here in that we are actively partnering and communicating with other communities who are reaching out because as the number of communities that are facing a problem grows, the more that we are working together to speak in one voice, I think it's more likely that we're going to land in a place that actually yields a result.
And so part of the underfunding problem, I'm sure you've heard as we've been here the last couple of years, we're one of 4 districts that historically have been in the bottom 10%, both in the per pupil expenditure and the percent above net school spending. The other 3 being Dracut, Gardner, and Leominster. Last year, as we started to raise these concerns more aggressively with Senator Feeney, he actually arranged a meeting with the superintendent, myself, Mayor DeSimone, and the chair of the Education Committee in the Senate, Senator Lewis, who I can't remember if he's from Malden or just represents Malden, but as we were discussing our concerns with him, he's the one that initially pointed to it's the local contribution because that's hurting Malden as well. There was a contingent of folks from Gloucester and I think Framingham that were school committee members that were looking at the inflation cap index that's part of the Chapter 70 formula that says no matter what inflation is from one year to the next, the formula will only account for up to 4.5% inflation. And that, of course, during COVID and in the years immediately after COVID, when inflation was closer to double digits, that cap actually limited millions of dollars going to individual districts, not just into education on the whole. And so there has certainly been among the Mass Association of School Committees advocacy days at the State House to talk about funding. Those happen a little late in the process for impact of that year. But because as part of last year's budget, the Senate actually forced the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the Department of Labor Services, to host listening sessions to understand how Chapter 70 is negatively impacting communities. They hosted sessions late in the fall across the state. We actually submitted a joint letter from myself, Superintendent Sawyer, Mayor DeSimone, and the president of the Attleboro Educators Association, Joe Amaral, outlining all of the ways that each piece of the formula is negatively impacting Attleboro and all of the ways that the state could be adjusting other funding formulas to better support Attleboro. The superintendent talked about transportation. There are transportation laws that require that special education transportation both in district and out of district, but don't fully fund reimbursement or don't at all fund parts of those transportation costs. So I think the legislature is starting to hear more of those concerns from a number of communities. And once we finish our larger discussion, Representative Hawkins is here and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about some of the next steps that both of our elected bodies can do to help him, Representative Scanlon, and Senator Feeney better advocate with their colleagues up at the State House.
Thank you.
Councilor Morrissey, I don't know if you had your hand up?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
And I'll ask, since you brought it up, and one of the things that I was looking for tonight to hear was, you had mentioned the bottom 10 for per pupil spending and spending above net school spending. I didn't hear, are we still in the bottom 10 for both of those categories again this year, or?
I have not calculated exactly, because the state does not make it easy to determine that. So, you know, that's something we can certainly dig into if there's a desire to confirm that. But certainly, in terms of a percent above net school spending, there's no reason to believe that that's changed. Mm-hmm. The thing that might have changed is that under SOA, Attleboro got some money. Many communities got none under SOA, the Student Opportunities Act. Yeah. So as a result of that, those extra dollars probably do change a little bit where we stand in terms of per pupil. I don't think enough to really move the needle a lot, but without verifying, I'd be speaking out of hand.
Okay.
And sorry, just to add on to that, during that meeting with Senator Lewis, we talked about the Student Opportunity Act and how it was designed to support the half of the state that are lower income communities. But even within, I think they have 12 categories where they put school districts based on average family income or whatever the calculation is. The bulk of that money went to categories 10, 11, and a good significant portion of it was category 12. Attleboro was category 8. And so as that funding went to those communities, most of it went to the far end where we were.
Yeah, really a handful of communities got the lion's share of the dollars. And, Attleboro got scraps, but that's better than what most communities got, which was nothing. But that does affect our per pupil because we're spending more now as a result of those dollars than we were, before SOA 7 years ago. So exactly where we are on that is probably something that we should try to calculate again.
And then if I could share one more thing or ask another question. I know Representative Hawkins and I have been discussing, and Chair Geddes and I were talking about submitting a joint resolution from the school committee and the council beyond just asking for updates to the Chapter 70 formula, because that won't affect us for the fiscal year 27 budget. So we were talking about trying to put something together immediately so that we can get it to Rep. Hawkins and Senator Feeney to be able to hold up at the State House for tactical items for this year's budget to ask for. So I know I don't want to put you on the spot here, but if you have items, we'd love to hear those, and we want to put that together this week.
Saw the email, appreciate the communication. Our preliminary conversations identified a few things. Again, we'd like to kind of think this out a bit, but certainly transportation, as we identified, would be an easy place to point to. I believe we were talking about that special ed transportation was funded at 61%. By law, it could be as much as 75%. So if they just funded it at the maximum, which would be 75%, that would be an easy thing to ask for and justify, and would bring in a couple $100,000 to the district. So, that wouldn't be life-altering, but, every bit helps. From our perspective, the big one is health insurance, right? And, there is a factor in the calculation for health insurance. I'm sure it doesn't anticipate a 21% increase. So if there's some way that we can ask for specifically relief on, the health insurance increase, I think that's the most targeted way to get us to a better place.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council at this time? This isn't your last opportunity by any means, but. From the committee, anybody have any questions or comments at this time? This is an absolute rarity. Mr. Bennett?
I don't want to let you down, Mr. Geddes. Thank you. So the nature of the problem is that we're operating under a level service budget and have been operating under a level service budget, I'm guessing, for a fairly long time, right, Mr. Sawyer?
Yeah, yes. I mean, there have been a couple years in which we were able to go beyond that under SOA, but that's not the norm.
So for people who aren't familiar with that term, basically a level service budget is if you did something wrong last year and you got away with it, then you do the same thing this year because you don't have the money to correct it, right? It is essentially the death of 1,000 cuts. And that means that we can do what we're required to do and what other things we can find with the small percentage points of discretionary spending available in every budget. And operating under a level service budget is not an effective long-term solution to run a school department. Everything needs to expand. We need in order to deliver more than just the state minimum required for things like para ratios in special education classes, or for millions of things that we would like to do, middle school foreign language or Spanish, for example, right? For millions of things that we would like to do are not possible to even really seriously consider in a level services budget. If we had over the previous decade more money to play with along the way, we would be in a position now that if things get tight, we'd be able to handle that a lot better than we're able to right now. And it's because whenever you operate under a budget like that, you basically never solve the technical debt and the other problems that you've accrued over the years. You just have to keep going and keep the ship flying. And I want to commend you and your staff for doing such a credible job of keeping everything going. And it's not just going. If you look at some of those charts, you can see that we outperform school districts that are funded substantially higher than ours. I don't know how that can be, except that we have good staff, hardworking teachers, and people who are committed to the education of the students of Attleboro. And so that's essentially, in my opinion, the root of the problem, is that it's been a historical underfunding. It's not like a city versus schools thing or anything like that, because we all know we're all here for the same reason. We all are trying to do the right thing, and every one of us who is parents have made sacrifices for their children, and we as a city constantly make sacrifices for the better education of our kids. But because of that, there's no room for error. So what I really want to know is, there's about a $3.8 or so million gap between the governor's cherry sheet and what it would take to even do, like we said, the bare minimum required in order to keep the schools going the way they've been going. What are the real consequences of that if that shortfall is not met in some way or another? I want to make sure that people understand that its consequences are not like we don't upgrade the access points this year, right? I assume you're making some fallback plans or have some in your head contingencies about what would happen were we not able to meet a level service budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's the responsibility, is to plan for, what we're facing. Now, what's been unsaid that, maybe I should be explicit about is that the net school spending number, we have been consistently budgeted at a number above net school spending. And while, it would be presumptuous of me to predict a number, because there's a whole process that has to unfold, including, what the committee will request and what the mayor will approve and what the council will approve. So, I don't like to get out on a limb, but I'm hopeful that, as it has been the case in other years, we're going to get some number north of the minimum, because the community has been funding us at a level below the minimum for some time now. And so that's going to be a significant, it's always been appreciated and always been something that we put to good use. But in a year like this, it's essential to us actually being able to get to a place that we can continue to deliver what people have become accustomed to. The most significant portion of this shortfall is handled by what that number ends up being. And so, going to let that unfold, and hopefully that'll come in at a number that makes a significant contribution. But there's no reason to believe that that's going to be the way we get the whole distance, right? We've never got a number like that, and again, familiar with the city's finances, I don't think they have that kind of capacity. So there's some distance that we're going to have to come up with. And, we have begun really digging in on, how we're going to get there. I would hope that in any one particular year, including next year, we can do some, clever maneuvers and, make some accounting choices and prepay tuitions. And there's all kinds of things we've done in the past to help us to get through a particularly bad year. This is not the first one that we've dealt with, and I doubt it'll be the last. So, we have some methods for, accomplishing all of that. Trying to return a healthy sum at the end of this year, so that, assuming that the city returns it, as part of free cash next year, as we have done historically, that's another way to, get through it. Again, there have been things that we've done historically. I'm not looking forward to going through all those things, and certainly, we're going to talk about, we're going to have to look at every position, every decision we make about, when we have vacancies, is that position actually critical? Because, if we even just leave a position empty for, some period of time, that can help us. You do enough of that makes a significant difference. So there are lots of things we can try, and we're going to put together a plan and certainly inform the committee of what that plan is. But to your point, there's almost no way that this doesn't put more stress on the organization. And what we should really be worried about is that if you do that in 1 year, most of those things are a game that you can only pull off once.
Right.
When you compound it with another bad year, then, the bill comes due. And that's where you start to have to make the real difficult choices of cutting that level service. So I remain hopeful in this moment that through the things available to us that, we're not going to be reducing the level of service that we're providing to the students of this district for next year, even with the situation that's a challenging one that we face. But I do need everyone to understand that another, 2 years like that in a row, and it's unavoidable. And that's where you get to, we have to start cutting the things that aren't essential. That's, there's a whole host of things that affects. But luckily, I don't think that's where we are in this moment.
I just have one more quick follow-up, and I tried to do this math in my head. If the entire $3,200,000 in funding gap were made up by the city budget alone, right? What percentage over net school spending would that put us at? It would put up around 3% or something like that?
Rather than do mental math, I'm going to look that way.
I was hoping Scott would have the number in his head because he's better at math than I am.
Where we should be. Put us up 117.
Oh, Stores is working on it.
Already got it. It would put us back to where we should be, 117.
No, but what percentage over net minimum?
Was that
Since
four?
the cherry sheet
I
is at
think it
1
would be,
point.
and I think Brittany may have the number, it'd be about 2.5% above net school spending, somewhere in that vicinity. 2%? Oh, we're at 3, okay.
3.
So I think, to Mr. Bennett's point, I think part of why the governor's cherry sheet was so alarming is because in past years, we've discussed how we have an unsustainable funding model for our schools. And we've looked at it as this is what level service is, and this is where we anticipate to be with the state. This is where we should be to really fully serve our school community. And the cherry sheet it added this whole fourth basement level that I don't think anyone anticipated. And a lot of that a lot of that gap is driven by forces that are outside of the district or the city's control. And I think that's what makes it that much scarier. This isn't because of, this gap is not driven by salaries. It's not driven by out-of-district tuition, although part of it. It's driven by health insurance, higher than expected increases in transportation and out-of-district placements and so on and so forth. And so as the costs that we cannot control are drastically increasing, the costs that we have worked very hard to control are maintaining where they should be, and the funding level is struggling to catch up to even where we should be. So, sorry for the added commentary. Mr. Larson? Sorry, Mr. Bennett, were you finished?
The only reason why I asked the question about the percentage of net school spending is that I want to point out that we are so far below the state average as far as spending over net minimum that even making up the entirety of this funding gap out of the city's coffers would not put us in the luxury numbers of fabulously wealthy communities like Norton that somehow managed to spend 20% over the net minimum. And that's the reason I say that our baseline is so low that it's very hard for us to have room to improve based on the figures that we have. Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that we've talked about. We briefly talked about health insurance, and I think that has to be the focus of all of our discussions, all of your discussions, and neither of us, even collectively, can do anything about it. I made some comments last year at one of the budget hearings. If health insurance continues to go up at 18%, and the funding for the city, for the schools goes up 4%, we lose every year. And we're currently at about 15% of our budget is health insurance related. In 5 to 7 years, that approaches 25% of our budget. And I've done the math. I know I've shared it with some of you. Within my lifetime, if our income continues to go up 4% a year and health insurance is 18% a year, within my lifetime, it'll be 102% of our budget. Now, that's nothing this body can deal with. That's nothing your body can deal with. It's nothing the mayor can deal with. The state of Massachusetts has to fix this. And Massachusetts has to basically pass a law, and this is a suggestion that I have sent along, that the way to fix this is that health insurance premiums in Massachusetts can only go up 4% a year. If that happens, our budget works. Your budget will work. Attleboro's budget will work. If it goes up more than 4%, we're going to continue down this path. At some point, it'll be 102% of our budget. And I think it's important for the public to know the success of everything that's happening in Attleboro and in the public schools, because they should be extremely proud of what's happening within these buildings. But I think we also, as a city and as a state, need to look down the road, because there is a wave coming at us that we cannot do anything about except try to educate the leaders of our state and our country that we're on an unsustainable path. The superintendent is absolutely correct. 2 years like this, we are in serious trouble. But you know what? All 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts are going to be in the same situation. I mean, I hate to throw a wet bucket on the end of this presentation because he does such a great presentation and I love listening to it every year, but I think we cannot just say, oh yeah, health insurance is a problem and then talk about everything else. Health insurance is the problem. If that was fixed, the rest of it is very manageable.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Mr. Domenici?
Thank you, and I echo Mr. Larson's comments, and because of them, I'm going to alter a little bit of what I wanted to say, because we could talk about the fantasy numbers that show the gaps between what we spend per student versus what the state average is, or even what our DART average is. The DART average, which is the most closely connected group of communities based on our size and demographics, because if a smaller community is 40% over, but they only have 25% of the enrollment, that's not good comparison. But the DART district, it's $6,000 difference, and if you multiply that by 6,000 students, that's a significant amount of money. And that's not anything we would ever be sitting here and advocating for. That's well beyond what we can do. There is a document that was provided, talked about the underfunding estimate, and it has a listing of for about a quarter of that gap, what we would be doing. So when we talk about how much of our budget is being taken over by health insurance is a huge driver, out-of-district tuitions, transportation costs. What it's preventing us from being able to do is improve class sizes. Because that's one thing, while we're managing with what we manage with a high number of students per class. It's not allowing us to provide as many direct student services that we would like to be able to do for 52% of our population being in high needs. Looking at other ways to diversify the curriculum. We have people asking, how come there's no language in the middle schools and, different programs here and there, and it's because we don't have the funding for that. And because we have a lot of students in high needs, it's not always just special education services, it's other social and emotional supports. The number of paraprofessionals that we need would be significantly enhanced and really be able to give students that experience. So these are some of the challenges. When we put together the wish list, what would we do with even a fraction of the money if we could get it from any means? These are the types of things that this impacts. And since COVID, there's been a real, for a variety of reasons, people are not going into the education career. So I'm thinking ahead, we're not getting as many people coming into learning. And so I worry, even with, as teachers start to retire and we don't get as many coming in, it's not enough. We can't even, substitute teachers even now are impossible. I look ahead and I'm like, this is only going to exacerbate. So, I mean, a couple of these factors are out of our control. But it does show, like that document in particular, if you all have it, take a look at it, when we're done here. Those show real tangible things in terms of how it impacts students and our ability to provide them with what we feel we need to keep them moving forward. Despite the fact that we're able to do it so well now, that's a great testament for us, but it's also a bit of a curse because then it looks like, well, you can do just fine with your budget. We manage it, but the things that we could do that many other communities are still able to do, these are big gaps that we don't have. So while students, like they may be talking about cutting some of these types of supports, we don't even have these to consider cutting if we had to consider it. We're at the bare bones of what we're able to do in terms of staffing our students. So on that end, I just wanted to make sure that these are tangible numbers. So take a look at them, and if you have questions or you want to challenge at any point, happy to continue these conversations after this meeting and at any time. So thank you.
And I think it's even worth clarifying that that's not a wish list so much as a needs assessment.
Yeah.
Like in order for us to be, as I said earlier, providing what our school committee should be providing, that is what we would need. The wish list comes in, last year during one of our conversations about special education, Mr. Bennett asked the administration about could you have a backup paraprofessional available? And it was like the concept of having a backup staff member to provide that specific thing that needs to occur on a daily basis was such a luxury of wishful thinking that it had barely ever been considered. So that's more of the needs assessment versus the actual wishes of being able to go above and beyond what we should be doing.
The numbers we always talk about are what would it take to fund us just to get to the average? Not above average, but what the average community is spending. So just to strive for average is a significant gap currently. And as everyone has mentioned tonight, there are forces that are eating into that. The rising cost of healthcare takes away from our ability to maybe bring in more supports. And as Mr. Larson has stated, it's a much bigger issue than any of us here have. But it's important to put it out there in the open so that we can at least try to advocate for it together.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things I want to talk about, we talk about it every year, is about, when people see 117, or in this case, $114 million budget, they're kind of surprised. But when you look at how the budget is laid out, 50% of it, I believe, is salaries. And then you start adding more than 50%.
80%.
80% is salaries, but you're including the healthcare and all the other stuff in that benefit? No? Probably.
Yeah.
Either way, my point being, when you start adding it all up, you take the salaries, you take the benefits, you take the facilities, you take all those fixed costs that we, can't control once, up to a certain point. Once they're locked, they're in place. And we don't control increases in electricity and increases in heat and all these other things. We always talk about it every year. What's our discretionary, numbers? And I think in the past, it was, 2% or something.
3%?
Yeah, so around the 3%. Now, sure, when you have a $114 million, 3% seems like a lot. But some of the things that we were just talking about would eat into that 3% so fast. So the point is, every year, we're living with this much discretion. And with rising costs the way they're going, that is going to disappear, like, within the next couple of years. So it just adds that, because every year, people think that we could do so much because we get so much, but you can't, because it's already accounted for, and the discretionary is so little. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storrs. Municipal Council, I know we've made some additional points and gotten some additional comments from the superintendent and the administration. Any other follow-up questions or comments? Mr. Waterman?
Could you speak a little bit on what's happening with class sizes over the last couple of years and what the projections might be?
Class sizes have largely remained stable. We had, when we had to have significant cuts at the district level over 10 years ago, class sizes were at their highest. Over the next, say, 5 years, we brought those down, incrementally. And of late, we're keeping them at a pretty steady level. But it's important to note that our class sizes are high. Comparatively speaking, class sizes in Attleboro are higher than other districts, both locally and across the state. And like significantly, when we talk about what's the real impact of doing what we do with less. And back to the needs assessment. The needs assessment is an assessment of things that we need to do the job we are required to do, not the nice extra things we'd all like to do. That's another $10 to $15 million. No, to do the job that we're held accountable for, we need almost $10 million more. And people say, oh, that's not realistic. And perhaps we don't have the means to do it, but it's not an absurd position to take, especially when you compare our funding to anybody else's, our neighbors across the Commonwealth. And so back to answer the question, a kindergarten classroom in most communities, locally, across the state, 18. Here in Attleboro, it's 24. In most communities, there's at least another paraprofessional assigned to that kindergarten classroom. In Attleboro, we have, one for the grade. So there are real differences lived, and again, it's our teachers who bear the brunt of that, right? Because, the load that they carry is definitely associated to how many students they serve. There's just one person, they only have so much attention, and they have to spread that over, more students. We think that they do an excellent job with what they're asked to do, but think of what they could be doing if our class sizes were, again, just average.
And if you are interested in comparing to other districts, DESE's website has all the information, including DART districts, which change year to year. What was provided tonight is this year's DART districts for Attleboro. In years past, it's included communities like Middleborough and Falmouth. So it's not, this is a pretty urban list of school districts, but there have been much smaller towns that we've seen on that list of DART districts for Attleboro. But you can see statistics like average class size and enrollment data for any school district if you're looking to compare it to Attleboro. Anything else from the council? Anything else from the committee? So we'll give Superintendent Sawyer a chance to sit down, but one other piece of the funding calculation and budget process that we kind of skipped over in our discussion tonight is what happens now at the state level. Before the committee votes on a proposed budget to send to the mayor, the governor's budget does go through a process with the House of Representatives and with the Senate. Representative Hawkins is here tonight. So I wanted to give him an opportunity, if you want to step right up to that podium right there, sir. If you want to walk all the way up, you're welcome to. But just to give an opportunity to identify some of the ways that we can continue to advocate.
I don't want to follow in the superintendent's footsteps. I'm not as eloquent. So one of the things that's not in this discussion is the culture of this school district. I was a teacher when when the superintendent was a teacher, and back then, the one question they asked me when I was hired is, how long have you lived in the city? That was the thing they were most interested in. And it was a good show of what was going to come in the future, as I discovered the culture here in the city and in the school district that doesn't exist elsewhere. We've been underfunded since those days, and yet the school district still does some amazingly progressive, innovative things that don't happen in other school districts. The one that I'm thinking of as I'm sitting in the chairs is MCIA, the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment. Assessment's a big newsmaker right now. Attleboro is one of 8 school districts out of 350 working on that, and now it's a pilot program that's being used at 225 school districts, I think, across the state. And that's just the kind of things that happen here. I'm particularly proud that I got to teach here. I got to see a very dynamic organization, and I did you all a favor by retiring, so you didn't have to, I know you like to, financially. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm probably more of the advocate here, and I'm glad that you are working together, having a joint meeting, and will support me at the State House. We will be dealing with this first in the legislature. The other thing I wanted to mention, so I am rambling, I don't generally use notes. You're comparing the bottom school districts for funding, and interestingly, one of my best friends at the State House is Rep. Higgins from Leominster. And the demographics are very similar between the two, the financial concerns are very similar between the two. It's not anything to say about the other representatives. We're just fortunate that we only represent one school district. So we can focus on that, and it just happens that we have similar concerns. And we talk regularly about what we can do. So going forward, I asked you to start early on this, because before we voted on the budget, the big decisions have already been made. So it won't do any good to come to me in March. Most of the big decisions will have been made by then. And I think it's good. I asked you to start early. You started before the governor's budget even came out, so perfect, perfect. What I'm going to recommend you and I do, I can do some individual things for Attleboro. I've tried every year. I've never succeeded. I came close. During COVID, we thought that the student opportunity didn't pay very well because a lot of students stayed home. There were first graders because there was all the back and forth as to whether it was going to be in school or online training, and why would they start in the middle of that? And I got them to actually put aside a sum of money for reserve in case not just our district, but districts similar to us, the enrollment picked up after the October deadline. So the money was there, but the enrollment didn't come up, so we didn't get to take advantage of it. Last year, I put in a amendment and a bill for in-district school transportation, because that's supposed to be evaluated every year and hasn't been done for 20 years. And if that went through, it would have meant $1 million. It didn't, but I tried. I have a good partner in this with MTA, and that they have several full-time analysts, and they can do analysis for each school district and what would help for me, what would help my school district. So I have a good partner. But going forward, for what you're going to do is the combined efforts of the two bodies. I think it's important that you speak with one voice, and you also have good advocates to work with. It's a little early for me to say what this is going to be because the meeting was this afternoon. So I don't have a strategy yet, but you should have a similar strategy. You have the Mass Superintendents Association, you have the Mass School Committees Association, I have MTA, and a group of other advocates are meeting this afternoon to come up with a strategy as to how to approach it. So speak with one voice. The more people are saying the same thing, the more they will hear it. I'm going to guess I could probably reach out to the two chairs. You probably get this besides from me, but to make sure that we get a timely response, because I'd really like to see this advocacy while the budget's being crafted, not when we're just doing the little stuff at the end. Coming up, there's a letter that several of you in both bodies signed last year. I think 1,000 people signed it last year. The goal is this year for 2,000 people to sign, and that would mean everyone in both bodies. The people that didn't sign it last year should consider signing it this year. What hasn't been decided yet is when the Ways and Means hearings are going to be. Last year, the Health and Social Services was here at the high school. I don't know what the education hearing was at UMass Amherst. what I was taken by in that hearing was this is not just Attleboro who's suffering with the economics of teaching in 2026. It's across the state, and they're quite vocal. Some of them, this is the first time they've had to struggle like this. So we'll have good partnership with all the groups, with MTA, Superintendent's Association, School Committee Association. So we want to make our voices heard. It's kind of like, what are the expectations? Well, the budget is a little lean this year. We have to put a lot of money into healthcare this year. The economic forecast, the way the process works, it starts with a reconciliation with leading economists and advocacy groups to decide what we think we're going to have for revenue in fiscal year 2027. And the budget is decided from that. That's already happened. Then the governor's budget comes out, and then we get the next shot at it. So I'm on the hot seat right now. When we pass our budget, then Senator Feeney will be doing the Senate budget. So at that point, based on what we decide to do in the House, he'll be next. The Senate has the opportunity to change it. He did share his regrets. He called me about 5:30, said he has 2 things to do tonight, so he couldn't be here. But really, he's further down the road anyway for what he can do with this. So there's the letter. You're going to do a resolution. I'm going to go to the State House. I get a meeting, and this will be my statewide priority is to get something for education. The one thing in all of this, that regardless of what the advocacy groups come up with for a strategy, the one thing we need to do is revisit the Student Opportunity Act in Chapter 70. Chapter 70, as the superintendent said, was designed in the 1970s, and the point was that any student, no matter what zip code they go to, they should get the same education. If they're in a wealthy city or if they're in a not-so-wealthy city, they should get the same education. Then for decades, not much happened to it, and a lot of things happened in those decades. We added internet computers, we had special ed rules that changed, we had MCAS, we had a lot of things that weren't included in that formula. So based on that, the legislature took up the Student Opportunity Act, which was supposed to fix all that, and bring it up to modern standards, and it would be implemented over 7 years. But my caution going forward, if we were to study that, that took 2 sessions, and we're on a 2-year cycle just like all of you are, just in alternate years. It took more than 2 sessions to do that. So if we get them to study it and revise it, make it more effective for all the school districts in the state and Attleboro, it's still going to take 4 or 5 years. Now, I'm an advocate, and I think you should be an advocate for starting it now. There's still another year left of Student Opportunity Act. The Senate has already indicated a willingness to review it, start studying it now. What we saw at UMass Amherst in the Ways and Means hearing last year is any indication is going to be even louder this year. The House, though, is reluctant to do that. Probably a good thing that I'm there, because I'm going to be very vocal about this. They want to wait until the student opportunity is finished and then start. I mean, they're not going to change it in one session. I think they should start now, and that's going to be my advocacy, and I would suggest very strongly that you include that in yours, that it needs to be revisited, it needs to be studied now, not a year from now, because each one of those years is going to be painful. So thank you for including me. I think it's important, especially this year, because this year is tougher than others. The budget, we've got so many cuts, federal cuts that we're dealing with, an economy that's okay but shaky. I think we've got to be very careful. This is the year that we need to be very, very vocal about our needs.
Thank you, Rep. Hawkins. And just for clarification, I don't know how many of you on the council know this, but we made a few references to the Student Opportunity Act. That was not a long-term supplement to Chapter 70 funding. It was
7 years.
7 years.
Right.
And we are in year 6, and that's why part of why the advocacy is really heated up around Chapter 70, because that's
so I think you alluded to this. I think the neediest 6 districts in the state got the bulk of that funding. And we got caught in the middle, and this is a historical problem in that we don't get, in either the old formula for Chapter 70 or the Student Opportunity Act, we don't quite qualify even for the medium level of support from the state. So the cities that do end up with probably a third better funding per pupil than we do. And the other communities that don't, the wealthy communities in the state, they have enough, they're able to make up for that. They sometimes have double what we do per pupil. I think that needs to be addressed. I think the superintendent explained that better than I just did, but that needs to be addressed. That needs to be a new formula that doesn't leave a little desert in the middle where some school districts suffer.
Before he runs off, does anybody have any questions or comments for Representative Hopkins? Mr. Poor?
I'm Ms. Hawkins. I have one question. Do you know how much this state gives to illegal aliens every year?
To
Because I think
illegal
that might
aliens?
make a big difference with the school budget.
No, I don't.
Okay. It's about $5 billion in the last few years.
I haven't seen that figure. I'd have to find out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
That was easy.
Thank you, Rep. Hawkins. I'm
So
sure
I'll
you'll hear
be-
from us.
To both chairmen, I'll be talking to you very soon. These discussions are happening right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you to the council for being here tonight. We do have a few quick motions to go through before we adjourn, so if you can hang tight with us for just a couple of quick minutes.
Sounds good.
First, for the committee, I will entertain a motion, and this is something that Superintendent Sawyer referenced. I'll entertain a motion to authorize the transfer of $400,000 from the Special Education Stabilization Fund to the fiscal year 2026 Special Education Transportation line to cover any encumbered special education transportation expenditures with the intention to return any unexpected funds to the stabilization fund at the end of the year.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our January 12th, 2026 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, or edits from the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have 4 items on the consent agenda. Excuse me, I'll take them all as one motion unless anyone has any concerns or wants any pulled out separately. A motion to accept contractual obligation in the amount of $29.40 from Bay State Textiles to Hill Roberts Elementary School. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $2,475 admissions and transportation costs for 105 Attleboro High School students and 12 chaperones to attend the New Bedford Whaling Museum in March from the New Bedford Whaling Museum itself. Motion to approve an overnight field trip proposal for 7 grade 11 to 12 students to attend the DECA state competition at the Weston Seaport, 425 Summer Street, Boston, Mass. On March 12th through March 14th, 2026. And a motion to accept a contractual obligation in the amount of $76.25 from Planet Aid as broken down in the check receipt dated January 16, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or discussion? Just very quickly for the council's benefit, if you go back and listen to some of our consent agendas, this is a relatively small one. We often get thousands of dollars in donations, whether it's from local organizations that help to provide or fully fund some of the services that you heard the superintendent talk about tonight. Our PTOs are exceptionally incredible in adding technology to our schools. So we're very fortunate to have a lot of these donations to help support a lot of what the district is doing. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Upcoming reminders for the school committee. Tomorrow, February 3rd at 6:30 p.m., the Policy and Personnel Subcommittee will be meeting in the Zito Conference Room. Wednesday, February 4th, the Finance and Budget Subcommittee will be meeting in the Superintendent's Conference Room at 6:30. And our next full committee meeting is February 9th, 2026 in the Zito Conference Room. Any other updates from the committee? Excellent. Council President Kobus, did you have any other updates or?
Nope.
Go ahead and adjourn.
All right. So I'll see everybody tomorrow at 7 p.m. for the full council meeting. So move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned at 8:19.
Thank you, President Kobus. I'll entertain a motion from the committee to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Jeff is a little weak there.